Kat Lemoyne did an experiment. She called, I think, all the enterprise companies. This was a couple of years ago. And it's funny because when we launched IEB, my partner and I cold called inspectors. We smiled and dialed 8 hours once a week. So 16 hours of smiling and dialing every week. And Jackson's on, Jackson's here, the growth leader in IEB, and he'll probably nod at this. It was crazy what we learned when we called home inspection companies. And it was kind of surprising for me as a home inspection business owner. It was encouraging because I realized how unprepared my competition was with their phones. And it was disappointing how unprepared so many home inspection businesses are with their phones. And so here's a few things. I'm going to go through this pretty quickly. This was the experiment, and her statistics are very similar to mine. But today we're going to talk about we're going to talk about tools and strategy and mindset, but we're not going to go deep into the tools, the phone system itself. We're not going to go super deep into measurement metrics. We're not going to talk a lot about type of phone systems. That's for another day. In a Q&A, Amanda may have some thoughts on that. Rob Hopkins may have some thoughts. Some of you others may have some thoughts. We're not going to talk about scheduling software. Okay. There's a process on following up unscheduled orders. And that needs to be systematized because you get a lot of, hey, I'll call you back, or I need to talk to my spouse, or I need to think about it. Well, that can represent a lot of your calls, and it's pretty good to have a system in place to follow those up. Sometimes you're really good at converting those, sometimes you're not. But there has to be a consistent system in place of following up shoppers. You have to, what are the accountability measures for your scheduling team? How do you coach people? How do you measure it? Do you record your phone calls? And then there's the metrics of tracking performance, of tracking calls. How do you measure closing rates? Because if I did an interview of every single person in this call, we would have a different way of measuring our conversions. Yeah, we close at a 95%. We close at a 65%. Well, that number really means nothing if we don't know what they're measuring it against. So if you measure it like 70%, you hear somebody that's at 95%, you may be measuring things very differently. So you have to be sure, what are they measuring to determine 95% of what? 60% of what? For several years, we measured a percent of total volume of calls, which is crazy over a month period, but over a 6-month period, it kind of works out. But that conversion rate's a lot more like the 24% range. Okay. Mindset is always be improving and always taking action. So this is the data, and I want to touch on this because this is important. So Kat made 18 calls, called 18 companies. 11 companies asked my name. 44% didn't bother to know. 11 companies had friendly phone answering voices or attitudes, et cetera, et cetera. Here's what I want to, let's see, I want to do something here. I want to park here for a second. My experience, and Jackson, I want you to give me a thumbs up or a thumb down for your experience. Here was our experience looking back when Dirk and I were calling home inspection companies. 14% had a full mailbox. Mailbox is full. 14% of the calls we made, mailbox is full. 9% had no business message at all. Hey, this is Greg, leave a message. I didn't know if I was calling a person, if I got the wrong number. I didn't know who the hell I was calling. 13% never returned our call. Now, our call was very generic. Kat's call was very generic. Never returned a phone call. Now, ours was, we weren't pitching IEB. It was just like, hey, this is Greg Bryan. Can you give me a call? So it wasn't like, well, they didn't call me back for a reason. They didn't know why we called, and they still didn't call us. I sure as hell would have called somebody back, had somebody call and just left their name. 27% answer the call with, hey, this is Greg. Wasn't a company name, wasn't an introduction, wasn't a warm thing. There was no inviting part about it. 8% wanted to call back because they were on an inspection. Think about those numbers and think about how you answer the phones and what would happen if somebody shopped your business. When was the last time, if you answer the phones yourself, have you had anybody call you or test you all hours of the day and report back to you? This is a great opportunity for Builder, Builder Plus, and Builder Advanced to get in small groups and do shopping for each other. Y'all may have done this, I don't know. How would you feel if you knew that somebody's going to, in the next 30 days, somebody's going to shop your business and give you a report card? I was in the restaurant business. We had shoppers come in all the time, and we get like a 20-page report from the second they pull in the parking lot, cleanliness and everything else. What would it look like if you got a report on your phones? I think back in our earlier days, and I probably would have been, as when I was a one-man shop, two-man shop, three-person shop, when we executed well, but I would say a lot of times I probably would have been a little bit embarrassed about the way we handled calls. When we were maxed out, we'd never return a call. Hell, I'm already busy. I don't need to return a call. So think about that. With your phone system, do you have the capability of recording calls? And we're going to circle back to that. If you don't, that's something I would consider having a system of being able to record your calls, because that's necessary for a number of reasons. Recording calls for the consumer side, if there's even litigation, what was promised, what was said. But how can you verify the performance of your team? And Zach is going to talk about that in his training, how much we lean on recorded calls, on quality control, listening to recorded calls, people scoring themselves on a recorded call. It's quite shocking for all of us when you hear your own voice and hear what you're saying yourself. But sometimes it's shocking in a good way. It's like, wow, that really hit when I said that person. I could have done better in this area, that area. So long story short, when Kat called the enterprise company, nobody scored had a perfect score out of on her metrics. Not one enterprise company, and we're pretty damn solid. At enterprise level, you're pretty good on your phone. So you got a number of people calling, you got the system set up, and nobody scored a perfect score. I remember listening to Kat talking about this, thinking, well, I'm just waiting to get to the perfect score and it's going to be us. Nope. And then I got afraid. It's like, how bad did we do? I never did ask Kat how we did. Here's a statistic that I believe stresses the importance of a call. This is just a quick statistic on how many touches it takes to close a sale. The growth rep gets an agent to tell a client to call you, right? Hey, call Brian and Brian. Client may research you, look at your Facebook or look at your website, whatever it is, and then they'll call and they're going to call for a quote. And what happens? You go through all this effort to get somebody, all this work, all this expense to get somebody to pick up the phone to call you, and then we drop the ball with the call. What's the process if we do all this effort, time, effort, energy, money, they call, and then they get a quote and we don't follow up? What would that look like if you were to follow up all of your calls and you even close at a 15% rate? Okay. What I want to do, rather than being so heavy on, let's see, I want to start with Amanda because I want to leave time for a conversation with y'all. But Amanda, and this is for Rob and Michelle as well. What are the metrics we use because in our business we have a weekly managers meeting, and we reviewed our key performance indicators. How are we doing? Amanda, real quickly, what are the metrics that we use in scoring our performance in our call center?
It's a really loaded question, Greg. I think there's a couple of levels. One, you want to there's doing your call metrics to evaluate the business, but then there's the call metrics to evaluate your people. And so, there's two sides. Something as simple as how many calls come into your business. How many are you answering? Right? What's the answer rate? How many are you missing? That just leads to straight staffing questions, right? Do you have enough people to answer the calls coming in? So we look at some basic just like that. When we want to evaluate performance, it gets down to a couple of different things, right? At the end of the day, what we want is our call center agents to close the business. So the number one priority, especially on our sales side now, what is their close percentage? How many calls and quotes are they giving, and how many are they closing?
So Amanda, at the builder level, you have sole proprietors all the way to 2, 3, 4 inspectors. Maybe you're gonna have either an owner operator who's answering the calls, who may be in the field. You may have somebody in the house answering the phones. You may have a call rep who works in the house or works at home. If I were to say, hey, I need to start getting some easy metrics. I don't have a lot of time for data, man. I'm grinding. I'm working. I'm producing right now. What are the metrics that you would recommend that you start out with that would be easy to access, easy to digest, more importantly?
I think first and foremost, if you don't have enough people to answer your phones, your business is never going to grow. So even if it's as simple as how many calls are coming in and how many are being missed, right? To me, that's the most important one. Am I answering all of my potential business? And if you're not, man. So I get that's a data point, right? But I think it is extremely vital to the growth of a business.
Yeah.
But I think second to that, when you want to kind of evaluate or what that looks like, to your point, smiling. If you are the one answering the phones, are you smiling? Are you friendly? Are you engaging with the person that's calling you? Right. So our call rubric, Greg, I could pull it up and show it as well, right? But
I'd like to see that.
So we grade. You could grade yourself. So if you're answering your phones, kind of go through and ask some of these questions. This is how we are grading our call center reps, right? Can you tell if they're smiling? To Greg's point, to the test that Kat did, thank you for choosing your company name. How can I help you? Did you get the caller's name? Right? Some of those simple things, they're calling you to give you money. They're going to make one of the largest purchases. And we should be able to empathize with that when you're answering the phone, giving them the calmness that they're going to be taken care of. Right? Don't interrupt them. Let them talk. So these are points that we just kind of grade, right? And I know Zach can kind of speak to what this looks like, but they have this in front of them. So when they answer their calls, they know exactly how they're being graded. And if our reps aren't doing everything that's on here, that's where the call recordings come in play. We can go back and we can evaluate them. What are they missing? And we know how to coach them and move them in the right direction to help their close percentages.
I'm looking at the bottom screen. If you want to go to the bottom one, yeah. And for those of you, if it's small on your screen, by the way, when somebody shares, you can actually, like if you have a laptop, you can actually put two fingers on it and you can make your screen bigger. You make the presentation bigger so you can read it, for those of you who are technology challenged. That I learned that recently. It's like, wow, I'm really a smart tech guy now. But if you look at this, there's a couple of things we have that jump out at me. Are we mentioning some of the following? Our free pest service, our home concierge, our 90-day termite warranty. So there's metrics on things that they have to mention. And it's kind of a good, better, best, if I'm reading this correctly.
Correct.
It's in the best, they do more, 5 or more of the following things. 5 or more of the following things. Do you have, for those of you answering the phones, and you can take that down, Amanda. Do you have a consistent measure? And the reason this is important, some of you who are answering, who are owner operators, or who are a husband, wife, or just are two partners, or whatever it is, are probably really good on the phones. But there's a high likelihood you're good entrepreneurially. You're naturally good. You have a natural ability to close. Plus, you're really incentivized. But when you hire somebody, they may not be as incentivized because they don't connect that their entire livelihood is on getting this call. So if you don't have a system, what's my own rubric? What are my own measures for myself that I'm documenting? So when I hire somebody, I know what to train them on. These are the things that need to be said in what order. If I'm catching myself saying, hey, this is Bob, rather than saying, thanks for calling Brian and Brian, we're so happy to, that you called for us. How can I help you today? Or whatever it is we say. I don't know what we say.